I came and... This was the extraordinary thing. My dressing room, as I moved, seemed to lengthen out. To lengthen out. Huh? Oh, dust from the fan. Lovely. Yeah, the show must go on. Evidently, it must have been an effect of mirrors. For I had seen the mirror in front of me, and then suddenly it was outside the room without knowing. What? Without knowing how? Christine, you really must stop dreaming. I was not dreaming, dear. I was outside with my room without knowing how. You who saw me disappear from my room one evening may be able to explain it, but I cannot. I can only tell you that suddenly there was no mirror before me and no dressing room. I was in a dark passage. I was frightened. I cried out. It was quite dark, but for a faint red glimmer at a distant corner of the wall. I cried out. My voice was the only sound, for the singing and the violin had stopped, and suddenly a hand was laid on mine, or rather a stone-cold bony thing that seized my wrist and didn't let go. I cried out again. An arm took me around the waist and supported me. I was struggling for a little while and then gave up the attempt. I was dragged toward the little red light, and then I saw that I was in the hands of a man, wrapped in a large cloak and wearing a mask that hid his whole face. I made one last effort. My limbs stiffened, my mouth opened to scream, but a hand closed it, a hand which I felt on my lips, on my skin, a hand that smelt of death. Then I faded away. When I opened my eyes, we were still surrounded by darkness. A lantern standing on the ground showed a bubbling well. The water splashed from the well, disappearing almost at once under the floor on which I was lying, with my head on the knee of the man with the black cloak and the black mask. He was bathing my temples, and his hands smelt of death. I tried to push them away and asked, "Who are you? Where is the voice?" He only answered with a sigh. Suddenly a hot breath pressed over my face, and I perceived a white shape beside the man's black shape. In the darkness, the black shape lifted me onto the white shape, and a glad neighing greeted my astonished ears and murmured, "Caesar." The animal quivered. I was lying half back on a saddle, and I recognized the white horse out of the Profeta, which I had so often fed sugar and sweets. I remembered that one evening there was a rumor in the theater that the horse had disappeared, and that it had been stolen by the opera ghost. I believed in the voice, but I had never believed in the ghost. Now, however, I began to wonder with shiver whether I was the ghost's prisoner. I called upon the voice to help me, for I should never have imagined that the voice and the ghost were one. You have heard about the opera ghost, have you not, Rao? Yes, but tell me what happened when you were on the white horse of the Profeta. I made no movement. and let myself go. The black shape held me up, and I made no effort to escape. A curious feeling of peacefulness came over me, and I thought that I must be under the influence of some cordial. I had the full command of my senses, and my eyes became used to the darkness, which was lit here and there by fitful gleams. I calculated that we were in a narrow circular gallery, probably running all around the opera, which is immense, underground. I had once been down into those cellars, but had stopped at the 3rd floor, though there were 2 lower still, large enough to hold a town. But the figures of which I caught sight had made me run away. There are demons down there, quite black, standing in front of boilers, and they wield shovels and pitchforks and poke up fires and stir up flames, and if you come too near them, they frighten you by suddenly opening the red mouths of their furnaces. Well, while Caesar was quietly carrying me on his back, I saw those black demons in the distance, looking quite small in front of the red fires of the furnaces. They came into sight, disappearing, and came into sight again. As we went on our winding way, at last they disappeared altogether. The shape was still holding me, and Caesar walked on, unled and sure-footed. I could not tell you even approximately how long this ride lasted. I only know that we seemed to turn and often went down a spiral stair into the very heart of the earth. Even then it may be that my head was turning, but I don't know. So, no, my mind was quite clear. At last Caesar raised his nostrils, sniffed the air, and quickened his pace a little. I felt the moistness in the air, and Caesar stomped. The darkness had lifted. A sort of bluey light surrounded us. We were on the edge of the lake, whose leaden waters stretched into the distance, into the darkness, but the blue light lit up the bank, and I saw a little boat fastened to an iron ring on the wharf. A boat? Yes, but I knew that all that existed, and that there was nothing supernatural about that underground lake and boat. But think of the exceptional conditions in which I arrived upon that shore. I don't know whether the effect of the cordial had worn off when the man's shape lifted me into the boat, but my terror began all over again. My gruesome escort must have noticed it, for he sent Caesar back, and I heard his hoofs trampling up the staircase while the man jumped into the boat, untied the rope that held it, and seized the oars. He rowed with a quick, powerful stroke, and his eyes under the mask never left me. We slipped across the noiseless water in the bluey light, which I told you of. Then we were in the darkness again, and we touched shore, and I was once more taken up in the man's arms. I cried aloud, and then suddenly I was silent, dazed by the light. Yes, a dazzling light, in the midst of which I had been put down. I sprang to my feet. I was in the middle of a drawing room that seemed to me to be decorated, adorned, and furnished with nothing but flowers, flowers both magnificent and stupid because of the silk ribbons that tied them to baskets like those which they sell in the shops on the boulevards. They were much too civilized flowers, like those which I used to find in my dressing room after the first night, and in the midst of these flowers stood the black shape of the man in the mask. With arms crossed, he said, "Don't be afraid, Christine. You are in no danger." It was the voice! My anger equaled my amazement. I rushed at the mask and I tried to snatch it away, so as to see the face of the voice. The man said, "You are in no danger so long as you do not touch the mask." And taking me gently by the wrist, he forced me into a chair and then went down on his knees before me and said nothing more. His humility gave me back some of my courage, and the light restored me to my realities of life, however extraordinary the adventure might be. I was now surrounded by moral, visible, tangible things. The furniture, the hangings, the candles, the vases, the very flowers in their baskets, of which I could almost have told whence they came and what they cost, were bound to confine my imagination to the limits of the drawing room. Quite as commonplace as any that, at least, had the excuse of not being in the cellars of the opera. I had no doubt to do with a terrible eccentric person who in some mysterious fashion had succeeded in taking up his abode there under the opera house, 5 stories below the level of the ground. And the voice which I had recognized under the mask, was on its knees before me, was a man. And I began to cry. The man, still kneeling, must have understood the cause of my tears, for he said, It is true, Christine. I am not an angel, nor a genius, nor a ghost. I am Eric." Christine's narrative was again interrupted. An echo behind them seemed to repeat after her. Eric. Oh, excuse me. What echo? What echo? They both turned around and saw that night had fallen. Rao made a movement as though to rise, but Christine kept him beside her. "Don't go," she said. "I want you to know everything. Here." "But why here, Christine? I am afraid of you catching cold." "We have nothing to fear except the trapdoors, dear." That's a misquote. And here we are, miles away from the trapdoors, and I am not allowed to see you outside the theater. This is not the time to annoy him. We must not arouse his suspicion. Christine, something tells me that we are wrong to wait till tomorrow evening and that we ought to fly at once. I tell you that if he does not hear me sing tomorrow, it will cause him infinite pain. It is difficult to not cause him pain, and yet to escape from him for good. You are right in that, Raoul, for certainly he will die of my flight. And she added in a dull voice, but then it counts both ways, for we risk his killing us. Does he love you for so much? Does he love you so much? He would commit murder for me. But one can find out where he lives. One can go in search of him, now that we know that Eric is not a ghost. One can speak with him and force him to answer. Christine shook her head. No, there is nothing to be done with Eric except to run away. Then why, when you are able to run away, did you go back to him? Because I had to. And you will understand that when I tell you how I left him. Oh, I hate him, cried Raoul. And you, Christine, tell me, do you hate him too? No, said Christine. No, of course not. Why? No, of course not. Why? You love him? Your fear, your terror, all of that is just love, and love of the most exquisite kind. The kind which people do not admit even to themselves, said Raoul bitterly. That kind that gives you a thrill when you think of it. Picture it, a man who lives in a palace underground. And he gave her a leer.